what a dying gray alien revealed to Bob McKenzie in the Nevada desert in 1978 about Jesus' true power will shatter everything you think you know about miracles and prayer. Before this story ends, you'll understand why your prayers haven't been answered the way churches taught you, and you'll discover abilities within yourself that religious institutions deliberately kept hidden for 2,000 years. If you're ready to hear truths that will challenge 40 years of Sunday school, subscribe to Stories of Light and activate the bell. Because what happened to a 53-year-old mechanic on a warm May night in Rachel, Nevada, will open your eyes to technology Jesus mastered. Technology that lives dormant inside you right now, waiting to be awakened. Now let me tell you how an ordinary diesel mechanic's world exploded into something extraordinary. May 17th, 1978, Wednesday night, 11:47 p.m. Bob McKenzie wiped his grease-stained hands on the red shop rag hanging from his belt loop. The fluorescent lights of Bob's diesel repair buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor. He'd been working since 5 that morning, another 14-hour day, another evening alone in the shop while the rest of Rachel, Nevada slept. The CB radio crackled with late-night trucker chatter. Someone was hauling cattle to Reno. Someone else complained about a speed trap near Tonopah. Bob half-listened as he locked the toolbox, his body moving through the familiar closing routine it had performed for 30 years. At 53, Bob's hands were strong but weathered. Motor oil had permanently stained the creases of his palms. His gray hair stuck out from under his John Deere cap. His flannel shirt, once blue, had faded to something between gray and dust. He looked like what he was, a man who'd spent his entire life fixing things other people broke. He reached for the light switch, ready to kill the fluorescence and drive his pickup truck the 2 miles home to an empty house. Margaret's photo would be waiting on the kitchen table. 2 years gone, and he still set a place for her at dinner. That's when he heard it. A low hum, not mechanical. Bob knew every mechanical sound from diesel engines to air compressors. This was different. It vibrated in his chest, made his teeth ache, set something primal and ancient screaming in the back of his brain. Then the dogs started. Every dog in Rachel, all 23 of them in this town of 54 people, began barking simultaneously. Not normal barking, panicked, frantic barking, the kind of sound animals make when they know something humans don't. Bob stepped outside into the warm Nevada night. The sky was wrong. A greenish-white light pulsed from the northwest, from the direction of Groom Lake. Area 51 sat 40 miles away, and Bob had seen strange lights before. The Air Force tested experimental aircraft out there. But this light moved wrong. It jumped, appeared in one location, then instantly manifested somewhere else, violating every law of physics Bob understood. And it was coming directly toward him. "Jesus Christ," Bob whispered, then immediately felt guilty for taking the Lord's name in vain. 40 years of Baptist conditioning didn't die easy. The light settled rapidly, dropping toward the desert floor 2 miles north of town. Bob heard a sound like thunder, but sharper, more concentrated. The ground trembled beneath his boots. His rational mind said, "Get inside, call the sheriff, this isn't your problem." But 30 years of fixing broken things created an instinct stronger than fear. Something was damaged out there. Something needed help. Bob grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight from the truck, climbed into his 1972 Ford F-250, and turned the key. The diesel engine roared to life. Bob maintained his own vehicles, and they always started on the first try. He drove toward the light. The dirt road kicked up a rooster tail of dust behind his truck. The CB radio exploded with chatter. "Anyone else seeing them lights? Roger that, Bill. Looks like them sauces again. Third time this month, I swear." Bob's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd been through 2 wars, the Pacific in '44, Korea in '51. He'd seen men die, held his best friend while blood poured from a wound Bob couldn't fix. He understood fear. But this was different. This was the fear of facing something completely unknown. The light had settled now, steady and unmoving about 300 yards off the road. Bob stopped the truck, killed the engine, and stepped out into the desert silence. The sudden quiet felt oppressive after the diesel rumble. He clicked on his flashlight and started walking. Creosote bushes scraped against his jeans. Somewhere to his left, a rattlesnake buzzed a warning. The ground crunched under his work boots. 30 years of the same Red Wing boots, resoled 4 times. Above him, the stars blazed with an intensity city people never saw. Out here, 90 miles from Las Vegas, the Milky Way looked like a river of light. Bob's flashlight beam found it first. The craft sat tilted in a shallow crater, roughly the size of his pickup truck. A perfect disc. The color defied description, metallic silver, but somehow darker, as if the surface absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The underside glowed with a pale blue luminescence. 3 landing struts extended from the bottom, but one had snapped, causing the craft to list at a 20-degree angle. Scorch marks, reddish-brown, organic-looking, streaked across the surface. Bob stood frozen, flashlight beam trembling in his hand. This is real. This is actually real. His pulse pounded in his temples. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get back in his truck, to pretend he'd never seen this. But his feet moved forward. A section of the craft's wall shimmered. No sound, no mechanical whir. The surface simply opened. Pale green light spilled from the interior, and something emerged. The being stood 4 feet tall, impossibly thin, with limbs like stripped branches. Its head was enormous, grotesquely oversized for the frail body beneath. The neck looked too delicate to support that weight. But the eyes. God in heaven, those eyes. Completely black. Enormous almond-shaped pools of darkness that consumed half the creature's face. No pupils, no irises, no whites. Just fathomless black that seemed to pull Bob's consciousness forward. The being limped, dragging its right leg, one long-fingered hand pressed against the craft's hull for support. It was injured. Bob's flashlight slipped from his hands, hit the dirt. Run. Every cell in his body screamed it. Run. But he'd been a medic in the Pacific. He'd triaged wounds under mortar fire. And something in those alien eyes, intelligence, pain, and something else, something almost like gentleness, overrode his terror. A voice filled his head, not heard with ears, felt, experienced directly in his consciousness. Please, help, much pain. Not words, concepts, translated directly into Bob's understanding. The being took another faltering step and collapsed. Bob McKenzie, 53-year-old diesel mechanic, widower, deacon of the First Baptist Church of Rachel, Nevada, made a decision that would change his life forever. He ran forward and caught the alien before it hit the ground. Bob McKenzie had been fixing broken things since he was 7 years old. Born in 1925 in Rachel, Nevada, back when it was called Sand Springs, Bob grew up in a town so small it barely qualified as a town. His father ran the only gas station within 50 miles, and Bob learned early that out here, you fix things yourself or you went without. His first memory was sitting on the garage floor watching his father rebuild a Model T engine. The smell of motor oil, the metallic clink of wrenches, the satisfied grunt when a stubborn bolt finally gave way. These were the sounds of Bob's childhood. By age 10, he could diagnose engine problems by sound alone. "Boy's got a gift," his father told people. "Give him something broken, he'll figure it out." Bob's mother was a different story entirely. Sarah McKenzie was Southern Baptist to her bones, the fire and brimstone kind that saw sin in everything from dancing to playing cards. Every Sunday, rain or shine, the McKenzie family sat in the third pew of Rachel Baptist Church. Wednesday night prayer meetings, Friday evening Bible study. God was the foundation of everything. "The Lord gave you them hands for a reason, Robert," his mother would say. "To serve, to fix what's broken in this fallen world until Jesus returns." Bob believed her. He believed all of it. The virgin birth, the miracles, the resurrection, heaven and hell, every word of Scripture from Genesis to Revelation. Why wouldn't he? Everyone he knew believed it. It was simply true, the way gravity was true, the way Nevada was hot in summer. But even as a boy, sitting in those hard wooden pews while Reverend Patterson preached about the wages of sin, Bob's eyes would drift to the windows. Outside, the vast Nevada sky stretched forever. At night, the stars. So many stars. Is God out there? Or just here, in this little church, in this little town? He never asked the question aloud. You didn't question God in Sarah McKenzie's house. At 18, in 1943, Bob enlisted in the Navy. World War II was raging in the Pacific, and every able-bodied man had a duty. Bob became an engine mechanic aboard the USS Indianapolis, the cruiser that would later sink after delivering atomic bomb components to Tinian. Bob transferred off the Indianapolis 3 weeks before it sank. 900 men went into the water. 300 survived. Bob had known most of them. "Why did God save me and not them?" he asked the chaplain one night, months later, unable to sleep. "The Lord's ways are mysterious, son," the chaplain said. "We don't question his plan." But Bob did question. Silently, privately, in the darkest hours of the night, he questioned. He questioned again in Korea 7 years later, when he held Private Danny Reeves, 19 years old, from Tennessee, while the kid bled out from shrapnel wounds. Bob had medical training by then, but some wounds couldn't be fixed with bandages and pressure. "Am I going to hell, Sergeant?" Danny whispered, blood bubbling on his lips. "I ain't been to church since I deployed. Am I going to hell?" "No, son," Bob said, even though he didn't know. Even though 40 hours of Sunday school said that salvation required faith, and Danny's faith had clearly wavered. "God loves you. You're going home." Danny believed it. Bob hoped it was true. He came back to Rachel in 1952, took over his father's garage, and renamed it Bob's Diesel Repair. The town had grown, 54 people now, a real boom. Trucks hauling goods along Route 375 needed maintenance, and Bob was the only mechanic within 60 miles. He met Margaret at church. She played piano for the hymns, had a voice like an angel, and made Bob believe that maybe, just maybe, God had a plan after all. They married in 1950, had 3 children, Robert Jr., Susan, and Michael. Life was good, simple. Bob fixed engines 6 days a week, went to church on Sunday, and tried not to think too hard about the questions that still whispered in the back of his mind. He taught his children about Jesus, led Bible studies on Wednesday nights, became a deacon in 1965. From the outside, Bob McKenzie looked like the model Christian,
faithful, devoted, unwavering. But inside, the questions grew louder. He'd pray before meals. "Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this food, for your blessings, for your grace." But it felt like talking to an empty room. The words went up, 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 into that vast Nevada sky, and nothing came back. "Do you ever feel like God doesn't hear you?" he asked Margaret one night in 1974, lying in bed staring at the ceiling. "Of course he hears, Bob," she said, taking his hand. "We just don't always understand his answers." Bob wanted to believe that, tried to believe it. Then, in 1976, Margaret found a lump. Breast cancer. Stage 3 by the time they caught it. Bob drove her to Las Vegas twice a week for treatments, 3 hours each way, his diesel Ford eating up the desert highway while Margaret sat pale and silent in the passenger seat. He prayed like he'd never prayed before, out loud in the truck, silently while Margaret slept, on his knees beside the bed every night, hands clasped so tight his knuckles went white. "Please, God, please, I've served you my whole life. I've been faithful. Please, don't take her, please." The words went up into that vast, empty sky, and God was silent. Margaret died on March 3rd, 1976, 50 years old. Bob held her hand while she took her last breath. The morphine made her delirious at the end. She thought she was playing piano at church, her fingers moving against the blanket, playing hymns only she could hear. Her last words were, "Do you think Jesus will really be there, Bob? Do you think heaven is real?" "Yes," Bob said, squeezing her hand. He didn't know if he believed it anymore. The funeral was large. Everyone in Rachel came, plus folks from surrounding towns. Reverend Patterson gave a beautiful eulogy about how Margaret was with Jesus now, no more pain, no more suffering, rejoicing in God's presence. Bob sat in the front pew, wearing his only suit, and felt absolutely nothing. After everyone left, after the casserole stopped coming, after the sympathy cards stopped arriving, Bob was alone. His children had their own lives, Robert Jr. in California, Susan in Oregon, Michael in Arizona. They called every Sunday, but the house was still empty. Every evening, Bob came home from the shop, heated up a frozen dinner, and sat at the kitchen table with Margaret's photo. "Where are you?" he'd asked her picture. "Where did you go? Is there really anything after this?" The photo didn't answer. At night, Bob would lie in bed and pray out of habit. "Dear God, if you're there, if you can hear me, please give me a sign, something, anything, because I've followed you for 53 years and I don't know what I believe anymore." The prayers went up. Nothing came back. Bob began to think that maybe there was no God. Maybe the universe was just empty space and dead stars. Maybe he'd wasted his whole life believing in fairy tales. Maybe, when you died, you just stopped. Lights out. Nothing. That thought terrified him more than any enemy fire in any war. So, he kept going to church, kept leading Bible studies, kept pretending he still believed because the alternative, admitting it was all meaningless, was too horrifying to face. He was trapped, too old to start over, too scared to admit the truth, too broken to heal. Until May 17th, 1978. The night everything changed. The night a gray alien crashed in the desert and told Bob McKenzie things about Jesus, about miracles, about the nature of reality itself that no church, no preacher, no theologian had ever mentioned. The night Bob learned that his prayers hadn't been going to an empty void. They'd just been going to the wrong address.
The alien's weight was almost nothing, maybe 40 pounds. Bob lifted the creature easily despite his 53-year-old back that complained every morning. The being's skin felt cool and dry, like soft leather that had been left in shade. "Easy now," Bob said, even though he didn't know if the creature could hear spoken words. I got you." The telepathic voice touched his mind again. "Gratitude, pain lessening. You are compassionate." Bob carried the being toward his truck and then stopped. The fluorescent lights of his shop would be harsh on those enormous black eyes. Instead, he turned toward the craft. Can I put you inside your ship?" Bob asked. "Will that be safer?" "Yes. Interior environment optimal." Bob approached the opening in the craft's hull. Up close, he could see the surface wasn't solid metal at all. It seemed to shimmer, almost organic, like it was alive. The pale green light from inside didn't have a source he could identify. It simply emanated from the walls. He ducked through the opening. The craft was barely 5 feet tall at its highest point, and found himself in a space that seemed impossibly larger than the exterior dimensions suggested. The interior was oval-shaped, organic-looking, with no visible seams or controls. The walls pulsed gently with that green luminescence. A curved bench rose from the floor along one wall. Bob carefully laid the alien on it. "Okay," Bob said, stepping back. "Now what? Do you have a first aid kit or something?" The alien's huge eyes fixed on him. Bob had the disturbing sensation of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in his life. Not just his face, but something deeper. His thoughts, his memories, his soul, if such a thing existed. "You are military trained, medical knowledge. You can assist." "I'm a mechanic," Bob protested. "I patched up some guys in the war, but that was 30 years ago and they were human. I don't know anything about whatever you are." "Physiology different, but principles same. The leg is fractured. 3 places. Must realign bones. I will guide." Bob looked at the creature's thin right leg. Even through the gray skin, he could see the irregular angles where bone had broken. His old combat medic training stirred, dust-covered memories of battlefield triage. "All right," Bob said. "But this is gonna hurt. Pain is temporary. Permanent damage is forever." Bob gently probed the leg with his oil-stained fingers. The alien didn't flinch, but Bob felt a spike of agony pulse through the telepathic connection. He jerked back. Sorry, I... Continue. I can manage pain. You felt my discomfort because our minds are connected. I will shield better." Bob took a breath and continued his examination. 3 breaks, just like the alien said. 1 near what would be the knee, 2 closer to the ankle. Clean fractures, thankfully, not compound. "I need something to use as splints. Something rigid but lightweight." The alien lifted one long-fingered hand and pointed to a section of wall. Immediately, a panel slid open, revealing what looked like silver rods, maybe 6 inches long, incredibly light, flexible, but strong. "That'll work," Bob said, taking 4 of them. He'd done this before, in Korea, with Private Martinez after a mortar round had caught him wrong. The principle was the same across all species, apparently. Realign the broken pieces, immobilize the limb, let biology do its work. "On 3, Bob said. 1, 2. He set the first brake on 2, the old combat medic trick. Patients always tense on 3. The bone clicked into place. The alien's body went rigid, but no sound came. Proceed. Bob worked quickly, setting the other 2 fractures, then securing the silver rods along the length of the leg with strips torn from his rob shop rag. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional. There, Bob said, tying off the last knot. That should hold until whatever happens next. You possess healing instinct. You fix what is broken. This is your nature. I fix engines, transmissions, diesel pumps. Not people. Not aliens. All fixing is the same. You see the broken pieces. You understand how they should fit. You make them fit again. This is sacred work. Something in those words struck Bob. Sacred work. His mother had said the same thing 30 years ago. The Lord gave them hands to fix what's broken. Why are you here? Why did you crash? What are you doing on Earth? The alien's huge eyes seemed to grow even larger, if that was possible. I came with a message about the one you call Jesus, about the power he demonstrated, about the truth your churches have hidden for 2,000 years. Bob's breath caught in his throat. What do you know about Jesus? Everything. We were there when he walked your planet. We watched. We guided. We understood what your religions have forgotten. Bob sank down onto the curved bench opposite the alien, his legs suddenly weak. I don't understand. You will. But first, my ship requires repair. The propulsion system is damaged. Without it, I cannot leave. And if I cannot leave, if I am discovered by your military, the message will never be delivered. Will you help me? Bob looked at this impossible creature, in this impossible craft, being asked an impossible question. His entire worldview was shattering. Everything he had believed, or stopped believing, was suddenly uncertain again. I'm a diesel mechanic, Bob said quietly. I don't know anything about alien propulsion systems. You know more than you think. Metal is metal. Energy is energy. The principles are universal. I will guide your hands, but I cannot do the physical work. My body is too damaged. I need you, Bob McKenzie. The alien knew his name, had plucked it from his thoughts. Bob thought about Margaret, about all those prayers that seemed to go unanswered, about 53 years of faith that had slowly eroded into doubt. Maybe this was God's answer. Not in the way he had expected. Not through church or prayer or scripture. But an answer nonetheless. Okay, Bob said finally. Show me what needs fixing.
The alien, who identified himself through the telepathic link as Tail, led Bob to the craft's propulsion system, or rather, guided Bob's attention to what Tail called the propulsion core. It looked nothing like any engine Bob had ever seen. A crystalline sphere, roughly the size of a basketball, hovered in the center of the craft. Not suspended by wires or machinery, It simply floated, rotating slowly, pulsing with that same pale blue light that illuminated the craft's underside. Intricate geometric patterns moved across its surface like living things. "This is your engine?" Bob asked. "Not engine. Consciousness interface. The craft responds to thought." But the crystal matrix was damaged in the atmospheric entry. 3 harmonics are misaligned. It cannot generate sufficient field coherence for dimensional transition. Bob understood maybe 1 word in 5. "Okay, in English for the guy who fixes diesel trucks, what's broken and how do I fix it?" Tail's large head tilted slightly. Bob was learning to read the gesture as thoughtfulness. "The crystal must vibrate at specific frequencies to fold space. Think of it as a musical instrument. It must play the correct notes. Currently, 3 notes are wrong. You must retune them." "How?" "By touching the crystal and adjusting the frequency with your consciousness. Your intention affects physical matter more than you realize." Bob stared at the alien. "My intention? What does that even mean?" "It means exactly what your Jesus taught, that consciousness creates reality, that focused intention affects physical matter, that what you call miracles are simply applications of natural law." Bob's heart rate spiked. "What do you know about Jesus?" "I know what he truly was, not what your churches claim. Would you like me to tell you?" Bob's mouth was dry. 53 years of Sunday school, of Bible study, of sermons about the Son of God who died for humanity's sins. All of it suddenly felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I don't know if I'm ready." "You have been ready your entire life, Bob McKenzie. Every prayer you spoke that seemed unanswered. Every time you looked at the stars and wondered if God was there. Every moment you felt truth was incomplete. You were ready." Bob sat down heavily on the curved bench. His hands were shaking. "Margaret died 2 years ago, my wife. Cancer. I prayed every day for God to heal her, every single day. Nothing happened. She died anyway, scared and in pain. If Jesus could heal the sick, why couldn't God heal her?" "Because you were praying wrong." The words hit Bob like a physical blow. "What?" "For 53 years, you have been taught to pray from a position of lack, of unworthiness. You beg an external God for mercy, for healing, for intervention. You operate from the frequency of desperation, and desperation is exactly what you manifest, more desperation." That's not how prayer works. You ask God for things, He answers if it's His will." "No." The telepathic voice was gentle but firm. "That is how your churches taught you to pray to maintain their power over you. The truth is different. Jesus tried to teach it, but his message was corrupted within generations." Bob's head spun. "You're saying the Bible's wrong?" "I am saying the Bible is incomplete. Edited, translated, reinterpreted. The essential truths were removed because empowered humans do not need institutional control." I can't." Bob put his hands in his hands. "This is too much. Too fast. Too devastating." "Then let me show you instead of tell you. Will you touch the crystal?" Bob looked up at the floating sphere. It pulsed gently, invitingly, like a heartbeat made of light. Every instinct screamed this was dangerous, blasphemous, wrong. But another part of him, the part that had questioned since childhood, the part that had felt the emptiness of unanswered prayers, that part whispered, finally, truth. Bob stood, approached the crystal.
extended his oil-stained mechanic's hand. "What will happen?" he asked. "You will understand." Bob's fingertips touched the crystal surface. The universe exploded. Information flooded his consciousness, not words, not images, but pure understanding. He saw Jesus, but not the Jesus of stained glass windows and children's Bible illustrations. He saw a being of immense consciousness, of evolution so advanced it appeared magical to primitive human minds. He saw Jesus healing the sick, not through divine intervention, but through precise manipulation of energetic frequencies, cellular regeneration directed by consciousness, biology responding to focused intention. He saw Jesus multiplying loaves and fishes, not supernatural creation from nothing, but molecular reorganization through understanding the relationship between consciousness and matter. He saw Jesus walking on water, not defying physics, but understanding that perception creates reality, that certainty at the quantum level affects probability fields. He saw Jesus raising the dead, not reversing death, but understanding that consciousness transcends physical form, that what humans call death is merely a transition. And he understood, with devastating clarity, that Jesus had been trying to teach humanity these principles, that the miracles weren't demonstrations of what God could do. They were demonstrations of what humans could do when they remembered their true nature. You are divine consciousness having a temporary human experience. The kingdom of God is within you. You will do greater works than I have done. Not metaphor, technical instruction. Bob jerked his hand away from the crystal, gasping. Tail watched him with those fathomless black eyes. Now you begin to understand. Your Jesus was not the only son of a distant God. He was an awakened human, showing all humans their potential. He was one of us, a being of advanced consciousness who chose to incarnate among you to accelerate your evolution. No, Bob said, whispered. No, that's heresy. Jesus is Lord, the Son of God, the only way to salvation. Jesus is what every human can become. When he said, I and the Father are one, he spoke truth about all consciousness, not exclusive divinity. You have been taught to worship him. He came to teach you to join him. Bob's worldview cracked like ice under a hammer. Everything he'd believed, everything the church had taught, 53 years of faith. All of it incomplete.
I can't accept this, Bob said, backing away from the crystal. This goes against everything. Against everything humans added after Jesus died, not against what Jesus actually taught. Read your own scriptures with new eyes, Bob. The truth was always there. Your institutions simply trained you not to see it. Bob's chest felt tight. His head pounded. This was too much, too fast, too devastating. I need hair, he said. I need to think. He stumbled toward the craft's opening, desperate to escape into the familiar Nevada night, back to a world where diesel engines made sense, and God was God, and mechanics didn't talk to aliens about Jesus. But even as he emerged into the desert, breathing hard under those infinite stars, Bob knew something fundamental had changed. The questions he'd carried his entire life had just been answered, and the answers terrified him.
Bob stood in the Nevada desert, hands on his knees, trying to breathe. The craft sat behind him, glowing softly. Tail waited inside, and Bob's entire reality had just been shattered. I'm having a breakdown, that's what this is. Too much stress. Margaret's death, the loneliness, the questions. I've finally snapped. There's no alien, no craft. I'm having some kind of psychotic episode in my garage, and when I wake up, I'll be in a hospital. Bob pinched his arm hard. Pain bloomed.
He was awake. He looked back at the graft. Still there. Still real. Okay, so I'm awake. But maybe I'm hallucinating. Carbon monoxide poisoning from the shop? A brain tumor? Something medical that's making me see things that aren't there? The telepathic voice touched his mind. You are not ill, Bob. Your mind is protecting itself from information that challenges your worldview. This is normal. All humans do this when confronted with paradigm-shifting truth. Get out of my head, Bob shouted into the night. I cannot. We are connected now. The crystal established a resonance between our consciousness fields. I do not invade. I simply exist in your awareness as you exist in mine. Bob put his hands over his ears, even though he knew it was useless. The voice wasn't auditory. This isn't real. It can't be real. And yet, it is. Bob dropped his hands. Anger surged through him, hot and righteous. Even if you're real, you're lying. You're a demon. The Bible warns about this. Satan appears as an angel of light. You're here to deceive me, to turn me away from God. If I were here to deceive you, would I teach you about love, about healing, about accessing your own divine power? Would I show you how to help others instead of making you dependent on me? The devil is subtle. He mixes lies with truth to... Bob McKenzie. The telepathic voice was firm but not harsh. You have prayed to your God for 53 years. You have begged for answers. You have asked for signs. And when an answer finally comes, when truth is offered, you call it demonic because it does not match the doctrines humans created? Is your God so small that truth can only come through approved channels? Bob opened his mouth, closed it. He had no answer. The church has studied these things for 2,000 years. Theologians, scholars, saints, people who devoted their entire lives to understanding God. Are you saying they're all wrong? That you, an alien, know better than 2 millennia of Christianity? I am not saying they were wrong. I am saying they were incomplete. Your religious institutions were founded by sincere people who taught the best truth they had access to. But over centuries, political power, institutional control, and human fear distorted the original message. That's convenient. Everyone else got it wrong, but I have the real truth? Bob's voice dripped with sarcasm. I do not ask you to believe me. I ask you to test what I teach. Apply the principles. See if they work. Jesus himself said, "By their fruits you will know them." If what I teach produces more love, more healing, more consciousness, are these not good fruits? Bob sat down hard on the desert floor. The dust puffed up around him. If I accept this, what does that make me? Everything I am is built on my faith. I'm a deacon. I lead Bible studies. I taught my children about Jesus. What am I, if that's all wrong? Not wrong. Incomplete. You taught your children the best truth you knew. You led people with sincerity and love. These things have value. But now you have access to deeper truth. Evolution is not betrayal, Bob. Growth is not apostasy. My mother would say I'm going to hell for even listening to you. Your mother taught you what she believed. She did her best. But fear-based religion that threatens eternal torture for questioning, is this truly what an infinite loving God would create? Or is it what humans created to control other humans? Bob had wondered the same thing 1,000 times, but hearing it said aloud felt like treachery. "Why me?" Bob asked, looking up at the stars. "I'm nobody. Just a mechanic in a town of 54 people. If this message is so important, why not reveal it to someone who matters? A preacher, a scientist, someone with influence." Jesus did not choose kings and priests. He chose fishermen, tax collectors, the ordinary and the broken. Do you know why? Bob shook his head. Because the broken are open. The wounded are humble. The ordinary have not built towers of ego that prevent new truth from entering. You are chosen precisely because you are nobody, because you will listen. Tears burned Bob's eyes. He blinked them back. "I've wasted my life," Bob said, his voice cracking. 53 years. I prayed wrong, I believed wrong, I lived wrong. All those hours on my knees, all those Bible studies, all those people I taught the same incomplete truth that was taught to me. How many people died like Margaret, afraid, thinking they weren't good enough for God's love because of what I taught them? Guilt is simply another frequency that keeps you trapped in powerlessness. You cannot change the past, Bob, but you can change the future. Every moment is a new choice. What you do with this truth now, this is what matters. But the years I wasted were not wasted. They brought you here. Every prayer, every doubt, every question, all of it prepared you for this moment. There are no mistakes in consciousness evolution, only necessary steps. Bob buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Margaret died, terrified. She asked me, right at the end, drugged up on morphine. She asked me if heaven was real, if Jesus would really be there. And I told her yes. I promised her, but she was scared. She was so scared. She thought maybe she wasn't saved enough, wasn't good enough, hadn't prayed enough. She spent her last hours on earth afraid of hellfire, instead of feeling loved. Because that's what the church taught us, fear, not love, fear. If what you're saying is true, if she was already divine, if she was already loved, if there was nothing to fear, then I failed her. I should have known. I should have told her the truth. I held her hand and fed her lies while she died. Bob was sobbing now. 30 years of military stoicism cracking open. I failed my wife when she needed me most. The telepathic touch was gentle, like a hand on his shoulder. Margaret knows now, Bob. Death is not an ending. It is a transition. And in that transition, the veils fall away. She understands now what neither of you could see through the fog of fear-based teaching. She sees clearly, and she forgives you. She is asking you to forgive yourself. How do you know that? Because I can perceive dimensions beyond your physical reality. What you call death is like removing a heavy coat. The consciousness continues, and in that continued state, Margaret has grown beyond the fear that held her. She sees clearly, and she is proud of you for seeking truth. Bob wept openly. The Nevada desert absorbed his grief, his guilt, his 53 years of carrying the weight of unanswered questions. And slowly, something began to shift. The tears weren't just grief, they were release. "Will you come back inside?" Tail asked gently. "I have more to show you, but only if you are ready." Bob wiped his face with his shop rag, stood slowly, his knees creaking, looked at the impossible craft sitting in the impossible desert under impossible stars. If I do this, if I accept what you're teaching, I can't go back.
I can't unknow it. Truth is a one-way door, but on the other side is freedom. Bob took a deep breath, thought about Margaret, about all those unanswered prayers, about 53 years of feeling disconnected from a God who was supposedly everywhere. What if the disconnection had never been real? What if he'd just been using the wrong frequency? Okay, Bob said. Show me. He walked back toward the craft and stepped through the opening into a new understanding of everything. Tail waited on the curved bench, his splinted leg elevated. Those enormous black eyes tracked Bob as he entered. You are calmer now. I'm not calm. I'm terrified, but I'm done running from truth just because it's uncomfortable. This is wisdom. Now let me prove what I have told you, not through words, but through demonstration. You are a practical man, Bob. You believe what you can see and test. So let us test. Sit, Tail instructed. Bob sat on the bench opposite the alien. Tail extended one long-fingered hand toward him, not touching, but hovering about 6 inches from Bob's chest. Be still. I am going to scan your biological systems. Scan? Like an X-ray? More complete than X-ray. Every cell generates electromagnetic signature. I am reading those signatures. Bob felt nothing, but Tail's eyes seemed to glow slightly brighter. After 30 seconds, Tail lowered his hand. Your left shoulder joint shows chronic inflammation, old injury from fall when you were 27. You still feel pain when weather changes. Your lower back, 3 vertebrae compressed from years of lifting heavy equipment. Right knee, torn meniscus 1952, never properly healed. Your liver shows elevated enzyme markers consistent with moderate alcohol consumption. You drink whiskey, alone, 3 to 4 nights per week since your wife died. And your heart. Tail paused. Your heart shows energetic scarring, not physical damage, emotional damage. Grief so deep that it has altered your cellular structure. This is killing you slowly, Bob McKenzie. Not cancer, not disease, grief. Bob stared at the alien, mouth open. Every single thing Tail had described was accurate. The shoulder injury from falling off a roof in 1952, the back pain from 30 years of lifting diesel engines, the knee he'd blown out in Korea, even the whiskey, something he'd told no one, ashamed that a good Baptist was drinking alone. How can you possibly know these things? You can't see inside me. Every condition creates a distinct energetic signature. What you call pain, inflammation, disease, these are disruptions in the natural frequency of healthy cells. Jesus perceived these signatures. This is how he knew what was wrong before people told him. He read their energetic fields. That's not in the Bible. Much is not in your Bible. Do you have a plant in your truck? Tail asked. Bob blinked at the random question. Yeah, actually. Margaret's cactus. I keep it on the dashboard. It's dying. I can't figure out why. Bring it here. Bob retrieved the small potted cactus from his F-250. Margaret had loved it, kept it healthy for years. Since her death,
It had been slowly wilting, turning brown despite Bob's attempts to water it correctly. He brought it into the craft. Tail extended both his hands over the cactus, palms down, about 4 inches above the soil. He closed his eyes, or Bob assumed he did. Those black pools simply seemed to darken somehow. Bob watched. For the first minute, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Bob saw it. The brown patches on the cactus began to green, not dramatically, subtly, like watching time-lapse photography, but in real time. The wilted sections straightened. New growth appeared at the tips, tiny but visible. In 10 minutes, the cactus looked healthier than it had in 2 years. Tail lowered his hands. Directed consciousness energy accelerates natural healing processes. The plant was dying not from lack of water, but from lack of love. It was responding to your grief. I showed it a different frequency, the frequency of growth and vitality. It responded. Bob touched the cactus gently. It was real. The transformation was real. Jesus did this to people? Yes, cellular regeneration through frequency alignment. He operated from such a high vibrational state that diseased cells automatically realigned to health in his presence. Tail gestured to a small metal bowl on a shelf. Bob hadn't noticed it before. Inside were maybe 24 grains of rice. Watch. Tail held his hand over the bowl. His eyes closed again. The air around his hands seemed to shimmer slightly, and new grains of rice began to appear. Not dramatically, not magically, but gradually, consistently, 1 grain, then another, appearing out of nothing, piling up in the bowl. Bob leaned closer, watching individual grains materialize. It took about 5 minutes. When Tail finished, the bowl held 3 times as much rice. "That's impossible," Bob whispered. "Matter can't be created from nothing. Conservation of mass." Matter is not created from nothing. Matter is consciousness vibrating at slow frequency. When you understand the relationship between thought and form, molecular reorganization becomes possible. This is how Jesus multiplied loaves and fishes. Not supernatural creation, conscious rearrangement of quantum probability fields. Bob picked up a grain of rice, of the new rice, felt it, completely real. "You're telling me Jesus was, what, a quantum physicist?" Jesus understood principles your science is only now beginning to discover. He operated from a level of consciousness where mind and matter are known to be one thing, not 2 separate things. "Now you try," Tail said. Bob laughed nervously. "I'm not healing anything. I'm just a mechanic." "You have a cut on your left hand, fresh from today. Show me." Bob looked at his left palm. Sure enough, a small cut from a sharp edge on a fuel line. He'd barely noticed it, the kind of minor injury he got daily. Focus on the cut. See it not as damaged tissue, but as cells temporarily out of alignment. Now breathe deeply. With each breath, imagine warm golden light flowing into your hand. Feel love, not emotional love, but love as energy, as force. Direct it to the cut. "I'm not healing anything." "Test it. What do you lose by trying?" Bob sighed, closed his eyes, felt ridiculous, but he breathed deeply and he tried to imagine golden light. though he had no idea what that actually meant. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then his palm began to feel warm, not burning, just warm, pleasant. Keep going. Feel the warmth as healing energy. Trust that your cells know how to reorganize. You are simply giving permission and energy. Bob breathed, focused. The warmth intensified. After 10 minutes, Tail said, "Open your eyes." Bob looked at his palm. The cut was gone, not healed with a scar, gone. The skin looked as though it had never been cut at all. Holy! Bob touched the spot. It was there. I know it was there. You healed yourself. You activated principles Jesus used. Your consciousness directed your biology. This capacity exists in every human. He came to demonstrate that you do not need external saviors when you can access universal healing forces directly. Bob's hands were shaking, not from fear, from awe. One more demonstration, Tail said. Think of someone you know who is sick, someone nearby. Bob immediately thought of Ellen Patterson, 2 houses down from his shop. 73 years old, crippling arthritis in her hands. She couldn't even open a jar anymore. Ellen Patterson, Bob said. Arthritis, she's in a lot of pain. Do you have something of hers, a photograph, an object she has touched? Bob thought for a moment.
She brought me a pie last week. Said it was to cheer me up after Margaret. The pie tin is still in my truck. I keep forgetting to return it. Bring it. Bob retrieved the aluminum pie tin from behind his truck seat. Tael took it in his long fingers. Physical objects retain energetic imprints of those who touch them. This tin carries Ellen Patterson's frequency signature. I can use it to establish a connection. Tael held the pie tin between his palms. His eyes closed. The air around his hands began to shimmer with that same quality Bob had seen during the rice demonstration. 20 minutes passed. Bob watched, barely breathing. Finally, Tael opened his eyes and handed back the pie tin. It is done. Her pain is reduced by 80%. Full healing will take 3 more days as her body integrates the new frequency pattern. But she will notice immediate improvement. Just like that? You healed her arthritis from 2 miles away? Distance is illusion at the consciousness level. Separation is illusion. All things are connected. Jesus sent healing across distances constantly. Physical proximity is not required when working with consciousness energy. Intention transcends space. Bob looked at the pie tin in his hands. It looked exactly the same. How will I know if it worked? She will tell you. Soon. Bob left the craft an hour later, his head spinning. 5 demonstrations. 5 impossible things that violated everything he understood about reality. But he'd seen them, touched them, even performed one himself. As he drove his F-250 back toward town, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn wasn't far off. He pulled into his shop just as the CB radio crackled to life. Bob? Bob McKenzie? You there? This is Ellen Patterson. Bob grabbed the receiver, hands shaking. Ellen? It's 4 in the morning. What's wrong? Wrong? Nothing's wrong. Bob, something's happened. My hands, the arthritis, it's gone. I woke up 20 minutes ago and the pain was just gone. I can move my fingers. I can make a fist. I feel like I'm 30 years old again.
Bob closed his eyes. Tears ran down his cheeks. "I'm glad, Ellen. I'm real glad. It's a miracle, Bob. A genuine miracle. I'm calling Reverend Patterson right now. We need to have a prayer service to thank God." Bob hung up the CB receiver. A miracle. Yes. But not the kind Reverend Patterson thought.
When Jesus taught love one another, he was not being poetic, Tale said. He was providing precise technical instruction for activating the most powerful force in the universe. Love is a feeling, Bob protested, an emotion. Love is a fundamental energetic frequency that maintains all creation. The emotion you call love is a pale reflection of this force. True love, what we call the love frequency, operates at the quantum level. Tal's telepathic voice became more intense, like he was emphasizing something crucial. At the cellular level, genuine love generates electromagnetic fields measurable by your instruments. These fields automatically promote healing, accelerate regeneration, optimize all biological functions. At the manifestation level, love frequency is the carrier wave for all creation. When you operate from this frequency, you align with the creative force of the universe. Reality rearranges to match your vibration. At the relational level, love dissolves fear-based patterns. When two people meet in love frequency, they create a healing field that benefits everyone in proximity. At the planetary level, if enough humans operate from love frequency simultaneously, the entire planetary consciousness shifts. This is what Jesus called Kingdom of Heaven on Earth, not a place, a frequency state. So when Jesus said love is the greatest commandment, he was saying this is the key to everything. Master this frequency and you master reality itself. Not romantic love, not emotional attachment, pure, unconditional, high-vibration love as force. This is the technology underlying all of Jesus' works. "You said I've been praying wrong my whole life," Bob said quietly. "Explain that." "You were taught to pray from supplication, from lack, from unworthiness. Please God, give me. Please God, heal. Please God, I'm not worthy, but..." Every word reinforces separation and powerlessness. How should I pray then? Not pray, manifest. Feel as if you already have what you desire. Jesus gave thanks before miracles occurred, because he understood that on the energetic level, they were already complete. Physical reality just needed time to catch up. Step 1. Feel gratitude for perfect health as if you already have it. Your biology cannot distinguish between actual experience and vividly imagined experience with strong emotion. Step 2. Elevate your emotional frequency. Desperation attracts more desperation. Gratitude attracts more to be grateful for. Emotion is the power source. Thought is the direction. Step 3. Release attachment to method. Don't dictate how the universe delivers. Set intention, then trust. The universe has infinite pathways you cannot imagine. Step 4. Maintain frequency consistency. 1 minute of proper manifestation followed by 23 hours of worry cancels the manifestation. Consistency matters. That's not prayer, that's like positive thinking. Your churches trivialized these principles into positive thinking to make them seem foolish. This is consciousness technology. This is how reality operates. Prayer as begging accomplishes nothing except reinforcing the frequency of lack. Manifestation through frequency alignment creates physical results. After Jesus' physical death, those who truly understood his teachings were systematically suppressed,
Tell said. Within 3 centuries, institutional Christianity had transformed his empowerment philosophy into a control mechanism. What changed? Bob asked, though part of him already knew. Original teaching, the kingdom of God is within you. Church doctrine, the kingdom is in distant heaven, accessible only through church mediation. Original, you will do greater works than I have done. Church, only Jesus could do miracles. You are powerless sinners. Original, I and the Father are one, and you are two. Church, Jesus is uniquely divine. You are fundamentally separate from God. Original, your faith heals you. Church, God heals if you are worthy and if it's His will. Original, love is the fulfillment of all law. Church, obedience to institutional authority is required for salvation. Why would they change it? Not malicious conspiracy, fear-based thinking. Religious leaders convinced themselves humanity wasn't ready for full truth, that people needed control for their own good. But the effect was the same. 2,000 years of humans praying to external God for permission to access power that was always within them. So billions of people have suffered? Because they were taught they were powerless, taught they were unworthy, taught they needed intermediaries. Jesus came to abolish intermediaries. The church rebuilt them within generations. You are living in the era Jesus anticipated when He said, I will return. His return is not Him coming from the sky. His return is the collective awakening of Christ consciousness within humanity. What does that mean? 2,000 years ago, Jesus planted seeds of awakening in the human collective consciousness. For centuries, these seeds remained dormant. Now conditions are optimal. The seeds are germinating. You are witnessing the beginning of a mass awakening. What happens if we wake up? If sufficient numbers of humans awaken to their divine nature, a resonance effect occurs. Awakened consciousness is contagious. Each person who remembers makes it easier for the next person. When critical mass is reached, estimated at approximately 3 to 5% of global population, humanity transitions to galactic civilization status. And what happens if we don't reach critical mass? Then the opportunity is lost for this cycle. Humanity continues in fear-based consciousness for another epoch. But this is your window. The next 20 years are critical. Bob felt the weight of that statement. What's my role in this? You are an early awakener, a seed that sprouted before the general flowering. Your function is to demonstrate by living example that awakened consciousness produces transformed life. Others will notice. They will ask questions. You will teach not by preaching, but by being. I don't know how to teach this stuff. You know how to fix broken things. Consciousness is no different. You will know what to do when the time comes.
The transformation didn't happen all at once. It happened in waves, over the 6 hours Bob spent helping Taliel repair the propulsion crystal. Somewhere around 3 a.m., as Bob's hands worked on crystalline technology he barely understood, his mind stopped fighting. The resistance, the voice screaming, "This can't be real," simply quieted. Bob realized he wasn't adopting new beliefs. He was recognizing truths he'd always known but been trained to ignore. Something ancient within him was remembering. At 4:15 a.m., while adjusting the third harmonic frequency, Bob started crying. Not sad tears, relief tears. 53 years of feeling unworthy, powerless, abandoned by God, all based on misunderstanding. "I wasn't broken," Bob whispered, tears running into his gray beard. "I was never broken." "No," Taliel confirmed gently. "You were simply disconnected from your power source. Now you are reconnecting." The tears kept coming,
decades of accumulated shame and guilt releasing like poison draining from a wound. At 5:30 a.m., with the crystal finally repaired and humming correctly, Bob sat in his truck and decided to test what he'd learned. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. "Thank you," he said aloud, "for perfect health. Thank you for the energy and vitality flowing through my body. Thank you for my shoulder feeling strong and pain-free." He felt ridiculous, but he focused on feeling grateful as if it were already true. His left shoulder, the one that ached every morning, began to feel warm. By the time he opened his eyes 5 minutes later, the chronic pain had decreased by half. "It works," Bob whispered. "It actually works." Over the next few days, Bob began noticing things he'd never seen before. Ellen Patterson came by to thank him for praying for her arthritis. She assumed he had, and Bob saw a soft, golden glow around her head and shoulders. An aura, he realized. He was seeing energy fields. When Tommy Jenkins, one of the regular truckers, came in with his rig, Bob knew, just knew, without being told, that Tommy's wife had left him. The grief hung on Tommy like a visible cloud. "You doing okay, Tommy?" Bob asked carefully. Tommy broke down crying. "How'd you know, Bob? I just found out this morning." Bob couldn't explain, but he could feel emotions now, read energy, sense truth beneath words. His latent abilities were waking up. Within a week, tangible changes appeared. The chronic back pain that had plagued Bob for 20 years diminished by 70%. He woke up energized instead of exhausted. A check arrived unexpectedly, a refund from Margaret's hospital for billing errors, $2,000 Bob didn't expect. His son Michael called out of the blue. They'd barely spoken in a year. "Dad, I don't know why, but I really felt like I needed to call you. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay, son," and meant it. Bob stopped going to his knees to beg God for things. Instead, he sat in his shop after hours and simply felt grateful. "Thank you for abundance. Thank you for health. Thank you for connection with my children. Thank you for Margaret's continued presence in consciousness. Thank you for guidance." No begging, no bargaining, just appreciation for what already was and what was becoming. And reality rearranged to match the frequency. One evening, Bob looked in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized himself. Same gray hair, same weathered face, same oil-stained hands, but different eyes. Alive eyes, aware eyes. I'm not Bob McKenzie, failed Christian, lonely widower, small-town nobody. I'm eternal consciousness, having a temporary human experience. I'm a spark of the divine, here to learn and grow and help others remember who they are. The identity shift was seismic. He wasn't the same man who'd met Taliel 2 weeks ago. On the 13th day after the encounter, Bob returned to the crash site at dawn. The craft was gone. Taliel had departed 3 nights earlier, after the repairs were complete. But Bob felt drawn to the spot. He stood in the shallow crater and felt a presence. Not Taliel, something larger. "You are ready," a voice said in his consciousness. Not Taliel's voice, but something vaster. "You no longer need external guidance. You have direct connection to the same consciousness field that guided Jesus. Trust your inner knowing. Live these truths. Your transformation will inspire others. This is your mission." Bob understood. He wasn't meant to start a church or write a book or become famous. He was meant to live so authentically, so connected, so powerfully that people couldn't help but notice something different. And when they asked, and they would ask, he would share what he learned. Not by preaching, by demonstrating. Bob went back to his shop and opened for business as usual. But nothing was usual anymore. Every customer became an opportunity to channel healing energy. Every conversation became a chance to plant seeds of awakening. Every engine he repaired became a meditation on fixing broken things, mechanical and spiritual. "What's different about you, Bob?" Ellen Patterson asked, 2 weeks after her arthritis healed. "You seem, I don't know, lighter." "I learned something," Bob said carefully, "about prayer, about how Jesus really healed people, about power that's in all of us." "Can you teach me?" Bob smiled. "Yes, Ellen, I can." And so it began. One person at a time, in a town of 54 people, Bob McKenzie became a teacher of consciousness technology Jesus had demonstrated 2,000 years ago. Not through sermons, through living example. For the first time since Margaret's death, for the first time in maybe his entire life, Bob felt truly alive. Not just surviving, thriving. Not just existing, creating. Not just believing in God, experiencing God as himself.
The morning after Tail departed, Bob's phone rang at 6 a.m. "Bob, this is Reverend Patterson. I heard about Ellen Patterson's healing, and I heard you might have had something to do with it." Bob hesitated. He was still a member of First Baptist Church, still a deacon, but everything had changed. "I prayed for her," Bob said carefully, "but not the way we were taught, Reverend." Silence on the line. Then, "What do you mean?" "Can we talk in person?" They met at the church that afternoon. Bob explained, carefully, gently, what he'd learned about frequency, about consciousness, about prayer as manifestation rather than supplication. Reverend Patterson listened, face growing progressively more troubled. "Bob," he said finally, "this sounds like New Age mysticism, like Eastern religion. This isn't Christianity." "Isn't it?" Bob asked. "Jesus said we'd do greater works than him. He said the kingdom is within us. He said we are God's. What if the church has been teaching a watered-down version for 2,000 years? I think you need to step down as deacon," Reverend Patterson said quietly, "at least until you work through whatever crisis this is." Bob nodded slowly. He'd expected this. "I understand, Reverend. I'll step down, but I won't stop sharing what I've learned. Then you may need to find another church." "Maybe I will," Bob said. "Or maybe the church needs to find what it lost." Bob continued running his diesel repair shop, but something shifted in how he worked. Before, he'd just fix engines. Now he fixed them while consciously directing healing energy. He'd place his hands on a malfunctioning motor and feel the energetic disruption, the same way Tail had felt disruptions in human biology. Engines started running smoother. Repairs lasted longer. Customers noticed. "Bob, I don't know what you did to my rig, but she's purring like she did when she was new. You're a miracle worker." Bob just smiled. "I just remembered how things are supposed to work." Word spread. Truckers who'd never stopped in Rachel's started detouring to Bob's shop. "Heard you got magic hands," they'd say. Bob didn't correct them. He just fixed their vehicles and, when they asked, taught them about frequency, intention, and consciousness. Some thought he was crazy, some laughed, but some, a precious few, leaned forward and said, "Tell me more." Money stops being a problem. Bob didn't get rich, that wasn't the point. But abundance flowed. Jobs appeared. Unexpected income materialized. The shop thrived. More importantly, his relationships healed. Michael called regularly now. They talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Robert Jr. flew out from California for a surprise visit. "Dad, I don't know what's different, but you seem happy." "I haven't seen you happy since Mom died." "I am happy, son. I found what I was looking for. What was that? Connection. To God, to myself, to everything. I was looking in the wrong places, but I found it. Even Susan, his daughter, who'd become an atheist after Margaret's death, softened. I still don't believe in God, she told Bob during a phone call, but whatever you found, Dad, I'm glad. You sound alive again. I am alive. For the first time in my life, I'm fully alive. Ellen Patterson told everyone about her healing. She couldn't help herself. Within a month, 6 people from Rachel and surrounding towns showed up at Bob's shop asking for healing. I can't heal you, Bob told them, but I can teach you how to heal yourself. He started holding gatherings, not church services. He called them consciousness development circles. Thursday evenings, after the shop closed, in the garage with the big doors open to the Nevada sky. 5 people came to the first meeting. By the third meeting, 15. By the 6th, 23. Bob taught them what Tale had taught him. Frequency, intention, love as technology, prayer as manifestation rather than supplication. I'm not a preacher, Bob said at every meeting. I'm just a mechanic who learned something important, and I'm sharing it because it works. Test it yourself. See if it's true. People tested it. Mrs. Henderson's chronic migraines disappeared after 3 weeks of proper manifestation practice. Young Billy Cooper's asthma improved dramatically. Marriages healed, depression lifted, financial problems resolved. Not through miracles, through people learning to access abilities that had always been there. You're doing something dangerous, Reverend Patterson warned Bob one evening, confronting him in the shop parking lot. You're leading people away from Christ. I'm leading them to what Christ actually taught, Bob said calmly. The difference is, I'm teaching them they don't need me or you or any intermediary. They have direct access. Isn't that what Jesus wanted? Reverend Patterson had no answer. Within 6 months, the movement had spread beyond Rachel. People from Alamo, from Crystal Springs, from as far as Tonopah, were driving to Bob's Thursday night gatherings. I heard about the mechanic who teaches what Jesus really meant, they'd say. I always corrected them. I'm not teaching anything new. I'm reminding people what they forgot. Some of his students started their own circles in their towns. The knowledge spread like ripples on water, one person teaching 2, who each taught 2 more. By the end of 1978, Bob estimated maybe 200 people had been exposed to these teachings through him or his students. 200 seeds planted. He wondered how many would sprout. Not everyone was supportive. First Baptist Church formally asked Bob not to return. He was spreading heresy, they said, leading people astray. Some old friends stopped speaking to him. The church community, the social structure he'd known his entire life, mostly turned away. You've been deceived by demons, one former friend told him. That wasn't an angel or an alien. It was Satan, Bob, and you fell for it. Bob didn't argue. He just said, judge by the fruits. Are people more loving, more healthy, more conscious? These are good fruits. But it hurt. Losing community hurt. Still, a new community was forming. People who'd been spiritually hungry their entire lives, never finding satisfaction in traditional religion. They gathered around Bob, not to worship him, but to learn from him. You're not our guru, Ellen Patterson said during one gathering. You're just the guy who remembered first. Now you're helping us remember too. Exactly, Bob said. We're all equals. We're all divine consciousness. I just got a head start. Bob still talked to Margaret's photo every night, but the conversations changed. I don't know if you can hear me, he'd say to her picture, but I want you to know I understand now about love, about consciousness, about what happens after death. You're not gone. You're just elsewhere.
in a dimension I can't perceive yet, but we're still connected. We always were. And sometimes, in the quiet moments after his Thursday gatherings, Bob swore he could feel Margaret's presence. Not as a ghost, as an awareness, a warmth, a sense of approval. "Keep going," he felt her saying. "You're doing what I always hoped you'd do. You're fully alive now." And he was.
Bob McKenzie's journey reveals something you may have suspected but never had the courage to fully embrace. You have more power than you've been taught. Much more. The churches, the religions, the institutions that claim to speak for God, they've kept you small. Not necessarily from malice, but from their own fear and misunderstanding. Fear that if you knew your true nature, you wouldn't need them anymore. And they're right. Because once you understand what Jesus really taught, once you activate the abilities he demonstrated, you become free. Not rebellious, just free. Jesus didn't come to create a religion of dependency. He came to demonstrate what every human being can become. When he said, "The kingdom of God is within you," he meant it literally, not metaphorically, not eventually, now, already, always. When he said, "You will do greater works than I have done," he wasn't being modest. He was stating fact. He was showing you what you can do when you remember who you are. When he performed miracles, he wasn't showing you what God can do. He was showing you what you can do when you understand consciousness technology. You are not a powerless sinner waiting for external salvation. You are divine consciousness having a temporary human experience. You are a fragment of God experiencing itself through your unique perspective. And the abilities that Jesus demonstrated, healing, manifestation, transformation, these are your birthright, not because you're special, because you're human. And being human means possessing divine potential that most people never activate. Now you have a choice. You can close this video and return to the comfortable illusion that you're powerless, that life happens to you, that God is a distant judge evaluating your worthiness. That's safe. That's familiar. That's what everyone around you believes. Or you can do what Bob McKenzie did. You can start experimenting with these principles. You can begin treating prayer as manifestation technology rather than desperate supplication. You can start channeling love frequency consciously and watch how reality responds. You can awaken to your own divine nature. The choice is yours. It's always been yours. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever experienced a moment where your thoughts seemed to directly create your reality? A time when you felt connected to something greater than yourself? An inexplicable healing that defied medical explanation? A prayer that was answered in ways that seemed too perfect to be coincidence? Share your story below. You might discover you're not alone in these experiences. You might find that thousands of others are awakening to the same truths, and your story might be the catalyst that helps someone else remember who they really are. If you want more stories like this, stories that challenge everything you thought you knew about Jesus, spirituality, and human potential, subscribe to Stories of Light and activate the bell. Because Bob McKenzie isn't the only one who has encountered beings with these revelations. There are more stories, more witnesses, more evidence that everything you were taught about religion is incomplete. Remember, Jesus' return is not him coming from the sky to save you. Jesus' return is you awakening to the Christ consciousness that has always existed within. You are the second coming. Not because you're Jesus, because you're finally becoming who Jesus came to show you that you are. The question is, are you ready to remember?